That night transformed everything in unforeseen ways. It commenced with a seemingly innocuous request from my stepmother, Jessica, asking me to remain at home while my father embarked on his customary fishing excursion. At the time, it felt routine, as weekends typically involved just the two of us. However, I was unaware that this night would transcend the ordinary, challenging the boundaries of our relationship and leaving an indelible impact. Ensure you subscribe to my channel. Thus, I can persist in delivering more captivating factual narratives such as this one. Do not forget to see this video until the conclusion, since this narrative promises to be exceptionally captivating. The home exhibited an uncommon tranquility that morning. My father's typical presence was absent, rendering the quietness peculiar. Having just completed my schoolwork, I was prepared to unwind when Chloe summoned me to the living room. "Could you assist me with a matter?" Her voice was kind, bordering on nonchalant. I felt her anxiety. However, I could not ascertain the reason for my little hesitation. "What do you require?" I approached Chloe, who always exhibited a serene manner, yet today felt distinct. She smiled, although an intensity in her gaze quickened my heartbeat. "Come sit down," she urged, touching the seat next to her. I comply with her request, uncertain of the impending events yet intrigued by the current situation. Chloe reclined, crossing her legs and regarding me with an intensity one had not previously observed. "You have matured significantly. You are aware of that," she remarked. Her tone was buoyant, yet the words carried a weight of unexpressed significance. "You are no longer the little boy I once knew." My heart momentarily faltered. This was uncharacteristic of her. Our relationship had always been amicable and informal, yet today seemed perilous. I stammered, uncertain how to answer, as she leaned in slightly, her gaze fixed on mine. "Indeed," she persisted, "you have transformed, and I believe we are both aware." Her manner of expressing it elicited a shudder. A peculiar tension permeated the room, and I was uncertain how to address Chloe. "What are you attempting to convey?" I inquired, ultimately articulating my query. I required clarity on the situation since the atmosphere was laden with unexpressed sentiments. For a few minutes, she remained silent, merely gazing into my eyes. After searching for the appropriate words, she groaned, rose up, and approached the window. "Your father has gone for the weekend," she stated, silently gazing into the yard. We were alone. I nodded, uncertain of the conversation's direction, feeling a knot grow in my stomach. She turned to face me, her countenance inscrutable. "You know, I've been contemplating," she started, her voice calm yet kind. "I have matters I wish to discuss with you, matters I have lacked the guts to express until this moment." I took a deep breath as she approached, her gaze fixed on mine. "Like us," she stated succinctly. The phrase lingered in the atmosphere, causing my heart to accelerate. What was her implication? Was illogical. I attempted to laugh. I turned it off, but my voice emerged tremulous. "What do you mean by us?" Chloe exhibited a subtle, knowing smile that caused a flutter in my stomach. "You have observed that as well, have you not?" she inquired, her voice subdued, regarding the transformation in our relationship. "We are no longer merely stepmother and stepson." My mind was racing to comprehend her words, although I instinctively understood the sentiment she spoke, as I had experienced it as well. The discreet looks and prolonged touches were consistently dismissed by me, as I was persuaded they were illusory. "I am unaware of what you mean," I said, my voice just above a whisper. She advanced even closer, her presence suffocating, and abruptly, the space seemed excessively confined. "Indeed you do," she said gently, her fingertips grazing my arm. I reacted by rising suddenly and distancing myself. In an attempt to clarify my thoughts, I said to Jessica, "This is absurd," my voice quivering. "You are my stepmother. We are unable to, we ought not to." However, she did not retreat. She pursued me, diminishing the space between us once again. "Why not?" she murmured, her eyes ablaze. With fervor, we acknowledged our adulthood and the absence of obligation to adhere to external regulations. I shook my head, attempting to resist the allure that was compelling me toward her. "No, this is inappropriate," I asserted, despite my internal conflict. Even as I said the words, I saw my determination faltering. But what if it is indeed her? I resisted her hand as it reached to touch my cheek. The contact sent a jolt through me, momentarily immobilizing me, ensnared in the intricate web she was weaving around us. I yearned to refuse, to push her away, to flee the room and erase this encounter from memory. Yet I was unable to do so. Something anchored me in place, and I despised myself for it. I could not dispel the sensation that events were spiraling out of control. The tension in the house became unbearable. Each time I encountered Chloe, the weight of our unspoken words pressed down on me, suffocating me. However, I was at a loss on how to address it or halt the gradual, inexorable pull leading us both toward something perilous. The days merged into one another, and every interaction felt fraught, as if we were traversing a razor's edge. I endeavored to maintain my distance. Minimizing solitary interactions with her proved to be rather challenging. She consistently discovered methods to be near and assert her presence, whether by a simple touch on the arm or her gaze from across the room. A persistent tension lingered, unyielding, until the night everything transformed. My father was at work. It was late, and I attempted to remain secluded in my room, hoping that by avoiding her, circumstances would revert to normal. However, I was acutely aware that this was unlikely. I could hear her moving about downstairs, the television playing softly in the background, while the clock on my wall ticked loudly, each second prolonging my discomfort and making it increasingly difficult to ignore reality. I contemplated calling a friend and fabricating an excuse to leave, but something restrained me from making the call. Instead, I found myself standing outside my room, absorbing the pervasive silence that enveloped the house. It was excessively quiet and still. At that moment, I resolved to take an action that would alter everything. I descended the stairs, each step feeling more burdensome than the last. Jessica was seated on the couch, a glass of wine in her hand, her gaze vacant as she fixated on the television. She did not acknowledge my presence initially, or perhaps she did but chose to feign ignorance. I paused at the base of the stairs, uncertain of how to proceed, when she glanced up, her gaze locking with mine. I saw that there was no possibility of retreat. Unable to sleep, she inquired, her tone kind. Her tone was nearly too informal, yet there was an element in her delivery that accelerated my heartbeat as it had on that initial day. "Yes," I said, lacking confidence in my own response. To elaborate further, I approached the couch and seated myself, maximizing the distance between us. Despite this separation, the palpable tension remained unarticulated. We lingered in silence for several moments, the only sound being the soft hum of the television. I sensed her gaze upon me, her eyes lingering in a manner that caused a tingling sensation on my skin. I was uncertain how to disrupt the silence without exacerbating the situation. However, before I could articulate anything, she spoke again, stating, "I have been contemplating our relationship," softly, her voice almost above a whisper. My heart skipped a beat. "Chloe, we cannot," I began, but she interrupted me before I could complete my statement. She asked, turning to face me fully, "Why are we pretending? There's nothing between us when we both know there are." Her words hit me hard. I wanted to argue, to tell her that she was wrong and that we couldn't go down this path. But the truth was I didn't have the strength to fight it anymore. I had felt it was the strange pull between us that had only grown stronger. I had tried to ignore it, convinced myself it wasn't real, but now sitting here with her, I couldn't deny it any longer. "We can't do this," I said. Though my voice lacked conviction even as I spoke, I knew they were lies. She leaned in closer, her hand resting on the cushion between us. "We're not doing anything wrong," she said, her voice low and intense. "We're not hurting anyone." I shook my head, trying to clear the fog that settled over my thoughts. "But it's not right," I argued. Weakly, she reached out and placed her hand on mine, her touch sending a rush of electricity through me. "Who decides what's right and what's wrong?" she asked, her gaze never leaving mine. I swallowed hard, my heart racing. I wanted to pull away to tell her to stop, but I couldn't. I was frozen, trapped by the moment, by the feelings I had been denying for so long. "We don't have to follow anyone else's rule," she whispered, her fingers tracing patterns on the back of my hand. "We can decide for ourselves what's right." I closed my eyes, trying to block out her voice and the feel of her touch, but it was no use. The walls I had built around myself were crumbling, and I didn't know how to stop it before I could say anything, before I could gather the strength to pull away. She leaned in closer, her lips brushing against my ear as she whispered, "Tell me you don't feel it too." Her words sent a shiver down my spine, and I hated how much my body responded to her and how much I wanted to give in. I opened my mouth to protest, to tell her that this was wrong and that we couldn't do this. But no words came out. Instead, I found myself turning to face her, breath catching in my throat as our eyes locked. The moment stretched on, the tension between us growing thicker with each passing second, and then, without thinking or planning, I leaned in and kissed her. It was soft at first, tentative, as though we were both testing the waters, unsure of what would happen next. But the kiss quickly deepened the heat between us, rising as we gave in to the desire that had been building for so long. My hands found their way to her waist, pulling her closer as her fingers tangled in my hair. The world around us seemed to disappear, leaving only the two of us, lost in the intensity of the moment. I knew it was wrong and knew that we were crossing a line we could never come back from, but I couldn't stop. I didn't want to stop. As the kiss deepened and my mind raced with 1,000 conflicting thoughts, I knew this was dangerous. We knew that we were playing with fire, but there was a part of me that didn't care about that and had wanted this for longer than I was willing to admit. When we finally pulled apart, both of us were breathing heavily. Our faces were inches apart. Her eyes were dark, filled with something I couldn't quite name, and I knew that things would never be the same between us. "I've wanted this for so long," she whispered, her breath warm against my skin. "And I know you have too." I didn't respond. I couldn't tell. The truth was too much for me to handle. It was overwhelming. Instead, I just nodded, my heart pounding as the weight of what we had just done settled over me. But even then I knew it wasn't over. The kiss had only been the beginning. There was more. There would always be more. After that night, everything changed between us. I couldn't look at Chloe the same way. Every time our eyes met, I felt a rush of heat, a reminder of what we'd done and of the unspoken promise of what might happen again. The air in the house seemed charged with something dangerous, something we both understood but didn't dare acknowledge openly. Days passed, intense, awkward silence. I kept my distance as best I could, but it was impossible to avoid her. Every brush of her hand and every passing glance felt like a spark threatening to ignite the tension that simmered just beneath the surface. I knew what was happening wasn't right, but there was a pull between us that I couldn't ignore, no matter how hard I tried. One afternoon, while my dad was out again, the silence, I was in the house, and it felt unbearable. Pacing the living room, trying to distract myself with the TV, but my thoughts kept drifting back to her. The memory of that kiss, the way her lips had felt against mine, the way my heart had raced. It was all too much. I hated myself for thinking about it, but I couldn't stop. Just when I thought I might lose my mind, I heard her footsteps behind me. I turned to see Chloe standing in the doorway, her expression unreadable. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The tension between us was thick and heavy. "With everything left unsaid, we need to talk," she said finally, her voice low, almost hesitant. I nodded, knowing that conversation was inevitable even if I wasn't ready for it. "Yeah," I agreed with my throat tight. "We do." She walked over to the couch, sitting down with a sigh. I followed, sitting across from her, keeping a careful distance. My heart was pounding in my chest, and I couldn't quite meet her eyes. I didn't know how to start. I didn't know what to say that would make any of this better. "I know things have been different," she began, her hands clasped in her lap, "and I don't want you to feel uncomfortable." "That's the last thing I want." I swallowed hard in my mouth. "I don't know what to feel," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "I mean, this isn't normal, right? We're not supposed to feel this way." Chloe looked down at her hand, her expression troubled. "I know," she said softly, "but it's not something we can just ignore either, can we?" Didn't have an answer for her. The truth was, I didn't know what we were supposed to do. Everything felt wrong. But at the same time, there was a part of me that didn't want it to stop. I couldn't explain it. I couldn't rationalize it, but the feelings were there, undeniable and real. She shifted on the couch, leaning forward slightly. I think about that night all the time she confessed. Her voice barely above a whisper, I can't stop thinking about it. My breath caught in my throat. I wanted to tell her that I thought about it too, that it haunted my every waking moment. But I couldn't bring myself to say the words. Instead, I just nodded, my heart racing. There was a long silence between us, filled with the weight of everything we weren't saying. I could feel the tension building. Again, that same dangerous pull that had led us down this path in the first place, and then before I could stop myself, I said, I think about it too. The words were out of my mouth before I could take them back, and once they were spoken, there was no undoing them. Jessica's eyes flicked up to meet mine, and in that moment I knew there was no going back. We had crossed a line, and now we were standing on the edge of something even more dangerous. She didn't say anything at first, but the look in her eyes told me everything I needed to know. There was a heat, there was a need that mirrored my own, and it terrified me. But at the same time it excited me in a way I couldn't deny. We can't keep doing this, I said, my voice shaky, though even as I said it, I wasn't sure I believed it. Jessica's gaze never left mine. I know, she whispered, but we're already here, aren't we? The room felt the air was too thick. I wanted to run, to put as much distance between us as possible, but I couldn't move. I was trapped not by her, but by my own desires. The pull between us was too strong and overwhelming to resist before I knew what was happening. She leaned in, her face inches from mine. I could feel her breath on my skin, warm and soft, and my heart pounded in my chest. For a split second I thought I might be able to stop it, to pull away and end this before it went any further. But then her lips were on mine and all rational thought disappeared. The kiss was different this time. It wasn't hesitant or unsure. It was full of the tension we had been holding back, the desire that had been building for so long. I kissed her back without thinking, my hands resting on the couch, gripping the fabric to keep myself grounded. It wasn't about love or affection. It was about needing, a raw, burning need that neither of us could control. My heart raced, my mind a blur of thoughts I couldn't grasp. All I knew was that in this moment there was no turning back. When we finally pulled apart, both of us were breathless, our foreheads resting against each other. The weight of what we had just done hung heavy in the air, but neither of us moved to break the moment. We had to stop, I said again, though my voice was weak, lacking conviction. Chloe nodded, her breath warm against my skin. I know, she whispered, but it's so hard, isn't it? Didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. We were trapped in this web we had woven, and no matter how much we told ourselves we needed to stop, the pool between us kept dragging us back together, and that's when it happened. She leaned into me again, and we couldn't resist it. It all happened so quickly, and as exciting as it was for me, she didn't seem to care after it was over. She smiled at me, letting me know she enjoyed it a lot. The next few days passed in a blur. We tried to act normal and tried to pretend that nothing had happened, but the tension between us was undeniable. Every time I saw her, I felt that same rush of heat, that same dangerous pull. It was like we tried to act normal and tried to pretend that nothing had happened, but the tension between us was undeniable. Every time I saw her, I felt that same rush of heat, that same dangerous pull. It was like we were circling each other, waiting for the moment when we would finally give in again. And I knew it was only a matter of time. One evening when my dad was out late for work, I found myself in the kitchen trying to distract myself by making dinner, but the silence in the house was deafening, and I couldn't focus. Every sound seemed to echo, reminding me of the weight of what we were doing. I didn't hear her come in at first, but when I turned around, there she was, leaning against the door frame, watching me with that same unreadable expression. Need any help? She asked, her voice casual, but there was something beneath it that made my pulse quicken. No, I'm good, I said. Though my hands were shaking, she walked over to me, standing too close to her overwhelming presence. Are you sure? I swallowed hard, trying to steady myself. Chloe, can I start? But she cut me off. We don't have to do anything, she said softly, her eyes locked on mine. But I think we both know where this is going. The words hung between us, heavy, and finally, I wanted to argue. You wanted to tell her she was wrong, but I couldn't, because deep down I knew she was right. We stood there in silence, in the space between us shrinking with every passing second, and then before I knew it, she was kissing me again. It was quick, almost fleeting, but it was enough to reignite everything we had been trying to hold back. My heart pounded in my chest, and I knew that this was only the beginning. The weeks that followed were a blur of stolen moments and fleeting glances. It was like living in two separate worlds. One where everything seemed normal and another where Chloe and I were constantly on the verge of something we couldn't control. The weight of our secret was heavy, but we couldn't stay away from each other, no matter how much I told myself it needed to stop. Needed to stop it from happening every time my dad left for work or stayed out late. Tension between us grew. I'd find myself in the same room as her, and without saying a word, we'd both know what was coming next. It was terrifying how easily we had slipped into this. Every touch, every look felt like we were crossing some invisible line, yet it was never enough to make either of us pull back. Instead, we were drawn closer together as if something bigger than both of us was guiding us down this path. One Saturday afternoon, the air in the house felt especially thick. My dad was at a company event and wouldn't be back until late. I could feel the shift the moment I woke up that morning. The quiet anticipation that had become all too familiar as the hours ticked by. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen. Something we wouldn't be able to come back from. Chloe was in the kitchen when I walked in, washing dishes with her back to me. But she must have known I was there because she didn't flinch when I stood by the door watching her. For a moment, unsure of what to say or do, the strange dance we were caught in had become routine, and I knew the steps all too well. She turned off the faucet and wiped her hands on a towel before facing me for a second. Neither of us spoke. The silence was loud, filled with everything we weren't saying. "Are you okay?" she asked. Her voice soft, her eyes searching mine. I wasn't. I hadn't been for a while, but how could I admit that? How could I explain? The storm raging inside me, the constant battle between right and wrong. "I don't know," I finally replied, my voice barely audible. Chloe walked toward me, stopping just a few feet away. "I've been thinking," and she began her words. Slow and deliberate. "Maybe we should talk about what's been happening." I tensed, not sure I wanted to have this conversation. What was there to say that hadn't already been said with our actions? But she wasn't backing down, and I knew I couldn't avoid it forever. "What's there to talk about?" I asked, my heart racing. She sighed, rubbing her forehead with the back of her hand. "I don't know. Maybe we need to figure it out. Where this is going, we can't keep living like this, pretending it's not happening." She was right, but I didn't want to hear. "Where do you think it's going?" I asked. My voice is sharper than I intended. Jessica flinched slightly but didn't break eye contact. "I don't know," she admitted. "But I do know that we can't keep tiptoeing around it." I ran a hand through my hair, frustration bubbling inside me. "What do you want from me?" I snapped, not because I was angry with her, but because I didn't have the answers. "Either do you want me to say this is okay, that I'm fine with it, because I'm not fine with any of this?" Her expression softened and she stepped closer, closing the distance between us. "I don't want you to be fine with it," she said quietly. "I just want you to be honest with yourself, with me." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut because I knew exactly what she meant. I had been lying to myself for so long, convincing myself that this was just a phase that would end if we ignored it long enough. But the truth was I couldn't stop thinking about her. Couldn't stop wanting her, and the more I tried to fight it, the stronger it became. "I don't know how to do that," I admitted, my voice breaking. "I don't know how to be honest about this." Chloe reached out her hand, resting gently on my arm. The touch sent a shiver down my spine, and I hated how much I craved it. "It's okay," she whispered, her eyes filled with understanding. "We'll figure it out together." The sincerity in her voice broke something inside me, and before I knew it, I was pulling her closer, kissing her like it was the only thing keeping me grounded. This time the kiss wasn't rushed or frantic. It was slow and deliberate, as if we were both trying to hold on to something slipping through our fingers. When we finally pulled apart, her forehead rested against mine, and we stood there in silence, our breaths mingling in the small space between us. I could feel her heartbeat, fast and erratic, matching my own. "Are we doing this?" I whispered, more to myself than to her. "I don't know," she replied, softly, "but I can't stop." Neither could I. As the days passed, we fell deeper into whatever this was. The moments we spent together grew more intense and more frequent until it felt like the only time I was truly myself was when I was with her. Knew it couldn't last. I knew that something had to give eventually, but I wasn't ready to face that yet. Then one evening everything came crashing down. I was sitting in the living room with the TV on but muted my thoughts. Far away, Jessica was upstairs, and my dad was supposed to be out late again. But I wasn't paying attention to the time. I was too wrapped up in my own head, thinking about everything we had done, and everything we couldn't undo. The sound of the front door opening snapped me out of my thoughts, and for a moment I froze in panic, rising in my chest. I hadn't expected my dad to come home. This early, I scrambled to stand up, but before I could react, he was already walking into the living room, his eyes scanning the space before landing on me. "Hey," he said, his voice casual but laced with something I couldn't quite place. "What are you doing?" "Just watching TV," replied in a tight voice, trying to keep the panic from showing. I could feel my heart racing, the guilt gnawing at me like a live wire. He didn't seem to notice, or maybe he did, and was choosing to ignore it. He sat down on the couch, flipping through the channels like it was just another ordinary night. I tried to calm myself, to convince myself that everything was fine, but the weight of what we were hiding was pressing down on me, suffocating me. Chloe came down the stairs a few minutes later, her face carefully neutral. She greeted my dad like nothing was wrong, like everything was perfect normal, but I could see the tension in her eyes, the way her hands fidgeted at her sides. Dinner that night was excruciating. The conversation was stilted, and every time my dad spoke, I could feel the walls closing in on me. Couldn't meet Jessica's gaze focus on anything but the knot of fear tightening in my chest. I thought we might make it through the evening without incident, that maybe we'd manage to keep up the facade for one more night, but as we were clearing the table, my dad suddenly turned to me, his expression unreadable. "You've been spending a lot of time with Chloe lately," he said, his voice calm but probing. My heart stopped. I glanced at Chloe, who had gone pale, her eyes wide with fear. "I guess," I stammered, trying to keep my voice steady. My dad's gaze lingered on me for a long moment, and I could feel the air in the room shift. "Anything you want to tell me?" he asked, his tone still casual, but there was something in it that made my blood run cold. I opened my mouth to respond, but no words came out. My mind was racing, searching for something, anything that would make this all go away, but I couldn't find the words. I couldn't lie, not when the truth was hanging in the air between us, so close to being exposed. Jessica's hand brushed mine under the table, a silent plea, but it only made the guilt worse. I finally whispered, my voice barely audible, "Nothing." My dad didn't say anything for a long time. He just looked at me with those unreadable eyes, and in that silence I knew he knew too. As I stood there, the weight of his gaze pressing down on me, I realized there was no escaping what had already begun. Even if the words were left unspoken, the truth was still there waiting, and it would follow me no matter how hard I tried to outrun it.